Okay, today you will be learning about categories of type. So there are thousands of typefaces. Not all of them are going to fit into these major groups, but these are the major groups, the ones who are most recognizable, and the ones that are probably the ones that you should know. So old style, modern, slab serif, sans serif, script, and decorative. A few vocab words, just so you know. You probably already know most of these, like serifs, which are the tails and the feet on letters. But monoweight is a very important one. It's the strokes of a letter form. When they have very little difference in thickness all the way around. Thick-thin transition refers to the change of that stroke weight in a letter as it moves from the thinnest part to the thickest part. Stress, that's the direction of the thickening of the curved stroke, whether it's slanted a little bit or not. You'll see what that looks like. Baseline, you already know, that's the invisible line on which everything sits. Just a few things you should know. Old style, this is the most common, definitely should be used first. It's based on the hand lettering, like when they use wedge tip pens. It always has serifs. The lowercase serifs are always at an angle, like the angle of a pen. So the little feet or the tails, they're kind of slanted, like diagonal. They're not straight down. Moderate to thin, thick transition. They have a diagonal stress, best used for body text because they have non-distinguishing characteristics which make it easier to read. These are some examples. Times New Roman is probably the most common one. You've seen that one a lot. Modern is similar, but it replicates the humanistic pen strokes. The changes in the culture and the time led to this, to a more mechanical type. The serifs are now thin and horizontal, not slanted. It has a radical thick to thin transition. That's what makes it look bold. Stress is perfectly vertical and has a dazzling effect, where the thin lines almost disappear and the thick lines are more prominent. This makes it a bad choice for body text, so you should stick to old style as opposed to this. It's kind of like how you don't type a body paragraph in bold. Slab serif, so it still has serifs. The Industrial Revolution brought this about when they started doing advertising, and they just developed a thicker type. The serifs on lowercase letters have a thick horizontal slabs, similar. There is little to no thick, thin transition, though. There's a vertical stress. It's high on the readability scale, and it's often used in children's books. So it's similar to old type and modern, but it's a lot easier to read. That's why it's used in children's books. Sans serif this is around the 20th century when people decided that getting rid of the feet and the tails on words was better. So no serifs. It's almost always monoweight, which means there's no visible thick or thin transition in the strokes. There's a few exceptions like Optima, but for the most part, no visible thick thin transition. It's all rounded out, all of it's even. There's no stress because there is no thick thin transition. Some examples would be Microsoft Sans Serif. That's the basic one. There's Helvetica, Arial. Those are the ones you're probably most familiar with. Script is the one that looks like cursive, hand letter calligraphy. Use it very sparingly, definitely not body text, and definitely not all caps, because then you can't read it. Here are some examples. Decorative is one you should also use very sparingly, because it's really hard to read. It's easy to identify, it's fun, it's distinctive, and it's easy to use, but it's very limited in its uses because it's so distinctive. If you look at decorative, the heading, it's fun and it's cool, but if it was written smaller, you wouldn't be able to read it. So try to stay away from that one. This is something you would use on like a birthday invitation. So now I'll show you really quick how to do this. I've got some type here, and right now I have it set pretty big. This is all script. This, I don't know if you can read that, but it's supposed to say English 3190. English is in all caps. That's why you can't read it. So script, not the greatest idea. But if we go for something simple, like an old type, and make it a little smaller, now you can read it. So the way to do this, the way to change it, highlight, come right up here to the font name. You'll have your most recently used. You'll have pinned, which are the ones that are most common. And then you'll have an A to Z choice right here. So you can change it to whatever you like, but just remember those categories and remember what's, take into account on what's best to use in a professional setting or however you're going to use it. Thanks for listening, guys.